So welcome everyone. Today we're going to run through the Bily and Gean operating pathway SIL readiness program compliance gated / CRM. Essentially, it was built specifically to run a very compliance driven NDIS business. So one of the biggest issues that I see, generally speaking, when I look at providers and what they're doing well and what they're not doing well is you think that you've got all your compliance in place. You think you've got your worker screening checks up to date. They're all compliant and none need reviewing. You think you've got everything happening in a way that is appropriate and compliant with the NDIS, and then you find out that you don't actually have those things. So, Bily is a way where unregistered providers who aren't is responsible for all of the things under the practice standards and the code of conduct that the NDIS say they should be. So all of the compliance, all of the incident reportings, the worker screening checks, the billing to the NDIA and all those types of things. So it's an excellent system. You can either go Bily if you're unregistered, or you can go Gean if you're registered and just use the CRM to have a fully gated, compliant package for your SIL operations. The first slide says it all, a compliance gated SIL operating and readiness platform. Get ready for free, operate where approved, run documents, training, rostering, CRM, billing and audit evidence in one place. You have to be approved internally to do that. It's not just a tick and flick. You can't just come in and be anyone. You actually have to prove to us that you are able to run a compliant business before you get through the gate. So I'll just go to the next screen. So what we'll cover, we're going to cover, the shift, what's happened in the space, in that SIL space. We're going to talk about the operating structure. So you, the registered provider or non-registered provider, and Bily's compliance gates. We're going to talk about pricing. There's an all-in-one model, or there's software only, or there's a bit of a hybrid that some providers will choose. What Bily is, it's one operating pathway end to end, two ways to work. You can operate through Bily or you can go Gean standalone. So free readiness, you can basically jump into both Bily and Gean, have a bit of a play around, see where you're at, see how the system works, and it doesn't cost you anything to jump in and do all that sort of stuff. So that's where we're at. So the shift, new SIL practice standards apply from 1st of July 2026. We've had maybe 200 or 300 inquiries coming around the new SIL practice standards. I think the biggest issue really is from a provider perspective. After we've spoken to so many, most people just don't understand that from July 1, you're meant to be practicing to the standards. So it's not about you've got 3 months until October 1 to get your act together. You are technically meant to be complying right now. So that means having the 0138 document standards. It would mean making sure that your workers are not only trained and you've got evidence of that training, but you also have some kind of evidence that they're competent. So it's one thing to do some training, to get through a course, to get an 80% pass mark. It is another thing to be deemed as competent. Okay, so they're the two things that stick out a lot for me when I'm talking to providers and to my team. People don't understand that they should have the 0138 documents now operational in their business, and they should have their workers trained, evidenced as competent. And the other thing, I suppose, that stands out is that a lot of people who think they're not caught in SIL are caught in SIL. So the definition has changed a bit, which we'll talk about in a minute. But long story short, everything's changed on the 1st of July. There's 4 new modules to the practice standards: supported decision making, practice governance, safeguarding, tenancy, housing and support. So they're the 2 deadline numbers, 1st of July 2026 and 1st of October 2026. I cannot be strongly recommending enough that you read the new practice standards so that you understand you are meant to be appropriately applying those practice standards to the business that you currently operate now. You don't have time to get it together. You're meant to be operating to the compliant standards now. So the application, if you're not registered at all for SIL and you're, what I call a clean skin, the application is pretty simple. You just have to have, your core documents and your SIL, the extra SIL module documents. You have to be able to answer questions around those documents. They need to be structured in fold as well. And, you get an auditor come in and looks at the documents and looks at your resume and says, you're a fit and proper person to be operating that business, and your resume says so, and you've got some history, that's great, and you've got these documents, that's great. So the application is pretty simple. The evidence is not. So if you've been operating as any kind of NDIS registered business or unregistered business, it's incredibly important that you have operational documentation. So when you go to an audit, the auditor will say, okay, show us your risk register and show us your complaints register and, whatever else they are asked to have a look at. if you've been operational, it would be reasonable to suggest that you should have some entries in those risk registers or those complaints registers, and they should be dealt with and closed out. So that's what I mean by the evidence is not so simple. We've been through a number of audits for a number of different entities, and until you go through every file with a very heavy checklist, you don't know how compliant you are or you are not. And I would suggest most non-registered providers out there will struggle to get through, if they've been operational, will really struggle to get through an audit, mainly because it's going to be very difficult for a lot of them to evidence that their documents are actually working documents and in place. Now, what the Commission does about that, or what they say about that when they do those audits and get those results through, the auditors come in and send the results off to the Commission, I have no idea. You might get non-compliance. They might be lenient. They might be strict. Generally speaking, if you get a number of non-compliance sort of marks against you, there's every chance that the Commission will get a recommendation from that auditor that says, don't pass and we're going to remove your registration. So it's a bit of a challenge. So if we go through this slide, you've got to have live evidence of use, registers with real dated actioned entries, incident, complaint, and risk records that are logged, followed up, and closed out, participant, worker, and house files that are current, signed, and consistent, training and supervision evidence, current certificates and supervision notes around that training, which I talked about at the start of this presentation, policies, procedures, and registers, so SIL-specific and version-controlled dated policies, procedures, and registered, governance and responsibility maps, so who is accountable for what. So you need all those things, and I would suggest that most unregistered providers may not have all of them or most of them, and I would also suggest that most registered providers who haven't been through a midterm audit may not have those things in place either. So meet Bily. Bily is one operating pathway end to end. So Bily is a compliance-gated SIL operating and readiness platform for approved providers. What does that mean? Well, Bily is an operating platform for a registered provider entity, so not the registered provider itself. So think of Bily as all the compliance gates. It's a piece of software that sits in between a registered provider and you as an unregistered provider or a registered provider. I feel that a lot of registered providers will probably start to use Bily as well. It's generally speaking, in our experience, cheaper to use a gated software program to run your compliance and have an in-house compliance team. So it doesn't really matter whether you're registered or unregistered. I think Bily is certainly on the table for a lot of SIL providers out there. So it's an operating pathway that applies, supports are delivered under a structured agreement with that operational registered entity in the background, subject to assessment, approval, and compliance gate. So you can't just show up and get in. You actually have to be somebody who seems like they're going to be running a compliant business. You have to prove that you're compliant on the way in. You can't roster people if their worker screening checks aren't up to date. It's basically a system that blocks as much non-compliance as possible in the SIL space and makes you audit ready whether you want to be or not, which is perfect for us. I think perfect for the majority of SIL providers in the country. But it's one place on the right-hand side here, one place for your operating evidence. So all your documents sit in there, your training evidence sits in there, your rostering and CRM sits in there, your participant information sits in there, your incidents, complaints, and risk forms all sit in there. You bill inside Bily, if that's what you choose to do, and your audit evidence also sits inside Bily. So it's one place to run your SIL business from zero to hero, from 0 to 100. You shouldn't need any other piece of software or any other spreadsheet or any other thing to run your SIL business. So how does it work? Here's the core idea. So you get ready for free. Basically, we'll give you a free account. You can upload compliance documents and see exactly what may still be missing before approval. Doesn't cost you anything. There's no obligation. When you choose to get operational or when we approve you, you can start to onboard participants, manage rostering and CRMs like every other CRM and rostering system out there, only better, is my personal opinion. And you can operate through the registered provider structure. So if you are not registered now, you can operate through a registered provider structure. So you do all the front end work, much like a contractor, I suppose, in the NDIS space, and the registered provider in the background behind Bily runs all the compliance, worker screening checks, all the billing and all that kind of stuff that sits inside that scope for NDIS SIL providers. So it's always on. So the whole idea here is it's a compliance gated piece of software. So if you don't have an approved file, means you can't onboard. If you don't have your worker screening check for a certain worker, if it's not up to date or if it's expired, you will not be able to roster that worker. It protects participants and the registered structure around all the things that you should be protecting participants and the registered structure around. So how does the operating structure work? There's three parts, clearly separated. Responsibility sits where it should and everyone is protected. So if you're the operator, you're on the left-hand side, you deliver the support work. You provide the day-to-day SIL support to participants and run your service on the ground. You do all that front-facing work like you normally do. The registered provider entity holds the registration and all the responsibility as per the NDIS Code of Conduct, practice standards, etc., etc. So compliance, billing, worker screening checks, and all the provider responsibilities around incident reporting all sit with the registered provider entity, and Bily gates the compliance. So Bily sits in between the operator and the registered provider entity and gates the compliance at every step. So again, no approved evidence, no operational access, so everyone is protected. So just to be clear here on the bottom, Bily is not the registered provider. Operational access is subject to assessment, approval, and a structured agreement with a separate registered provider entity, and there is definitely no guarantee that you'll be able to get into the Bily structure if you don't seem like you're going to be a super compliant operational company or business. So one platform, Bily and Gean. So we're offering one thing basically to essentially stop moving from Excel spreadsheets or Google Sheets to some other software, to some other lead gen CRM. It's a one-stop, one piece of software. Don't have to look at anything else. All the reporting is inside Bily and Gean. So you get your documents sit inside, your training, your rostering sits inside there, it's a CRM, all your participant information sits inside there, your incident stuff is all inside there, your complaints registers and all your complaint stuff sits inside there, all your risk forms and the things that you need around risk sit inside there. You do all your billing. If you're on the Gean side and you want to keep billing yourself and not using the structure of Bily, you can just use Gean, and it's just like every other piece of software out there. You just connect it to Xero and you export out to Xero and it bills for you and all that kind of stuff. Or if you're not registered and you're using the Bily platform, which I'll explain later on, we do all the billing for you, trace it, reconcile it, and pay you. And then there's all the audit evidence. So the key takeaway from this slide is you shouldn't have to look in any other piece of software if you're running your SIL business. This is a one spot to run everything from zero to hero. It's been designed that way. How it works. So there's two ways to work with Bily. On the left, as I said before, you can operate through Bily. So this is the assessed operating pathway. We charge 8 to 12% of billables to operate this way. You start at 12% of billables, and as you jump through compliance gates, i.e. no red flags on a software program about you, all your file notes are compliant, your documents are compliant, you're operating a nice squeaky clean business over a 90-day period. There are compliant hoops that you would jump through and you'd get down to 8% of eligible billables. So what you get inside Bily is everything, Gean being the software and CRM. So you get Gean, the software CRM, you get the worker training for your workers, you get billing support, evidence systems, all included under that applicable package. You operate under an agreement with a registered NDIS provider. Again, Bily is not that registered NDIS provider. It's just the gate between somebody doing the work at the front end and all the compliance that needs to happen in the back end. And it's always subject to assessment and approval, as it should be. Gean is a standalone software-only program. So if you are registered and you just want to use our software, our SaaS model to run your SIL business, Gean is the pathway that you would choose. It prices out at $10 an active worker on the front end and $40 per admin user per month, which is super cheap, I think, in the market. We've used many of the software programs out there for our own businesses, so I am aware of what the seat cost is, the per seat cost is, and I think you'll find that we're very competitive in that space for what you get, what the functionality and the compliance layers that you get from Gean and from Bily. So CRM, rostering, and frontline compliance workflows all sit inside that Gean standalone. You're not locked in under the standard monthly plan, white label, and enterprise options available. I think we've got $199 a month minimum package just because it does cost us something to have our bandwidth used up in servers and support people. So that's the two ways to operate. Left-hand side through Bily, 8 to 12% of eligible billables. You get Gean included in all that. Or the right-hand side is Gean standalone only, which is $10 for an active worker and $40 admin user per month. To provide a journey. So what do you have to do? How do you get in? Basically, you just apply for a free readiness account. We get you an account and you start to upload your documents. And we'll soon see whether you're all compliant or not because it's all self-gated. So you start to build your evidence file, your documents, your workers, your participant and house records. The software will send you a readiness score so that you know what's missing, you know what your gaps are. When you're ready, you can pay for activation, and there's different levels of activation depending on whether you go through the left-hand side Bily or the right-hand side Gean. So where suitable, we'll unlock the review training and other pathways. We get the operating agreement signed. If that's the pathway you're going to move forward with, Bily pathway, and all the compliance gates go live. So it's not difficult. You jump in, you have a play around, you start to upload some documents, you see if you like it or not, and if you want to move forward, you start to pay your money. Now, on the left-hand side, Bily, because we've got compliance obligations, there's no free trial. If you want to start using Bily and the registered provider entity pathway, you'll start to pay that 12% straight away on eligible billables. If you want to just test out the CRM software as an alternative, i.e. go the Gean pathway, we're going to give you 6 weeks as a free trial. So a couple of weeks to get all your documents in there, and then 4 weeks operational so you can see if you like it or not. So if you're after a free trial, reach out to the team and they'll sort that out for you. Gean by Bily. So Gean is your CRM rostering and frontline compliance tool. It's built into the Bily operating pathway or available standalone. So you can roster your team, capture file notes, and gate worker compliance with Gean. So you don't have to work through our compliance, our registered provider entity pathway, Bily. You're a registered SIL provider. You've got 1, 2, 10 houses out there in northeast Queensland or whatever it might be. You can just pick up Gean as your CRM and start to run a compliant, efficient operation using our SIL CRM rostering and frontline compliance software called Gean. So rostering links to compliance. So a worker on the left-hand side here, a worker can't be rostered where required screening, training, or induction evidence is missing or expired. Now, I should put a caveat in here. So every part of Gean has a override on it. So if you're a manager and for some reason, if there's a safety issue or if there's a genuine reason that you have to override a gated compliance piece, you can. You just have to genuinely write a note why you are overriding that, and that note may be and probably will be looked at by the auditors. So it has to be a proper reason. You can't just override it for no reason and think that it'll be okay, because it won't be. It'll be in the audit logs. It'll be flagged. You really do have to have a proper reason. But there would be exceptions to the rule, right? So if there's some kind of safety issue, if somebody's safety is at risk, you might choose to override one of the gates for some reason. But rostering linked to compliance, basically you can't roster people if they're not compliant. Worker compliance gates, so all the screening, training, induction, supervision and expiry is tracked before rostering and operational reliance. File notes and quality checks. So frontline notes are captured in Gean, checked for required fields and completeness. So what that means is if you get a file note that's less than acceptable from one of your workers, as an example, Gean is going to push back at that worker and say, not good enough, not enough information, didn't hit the brief on what a file note or a quality file note should look like, and it'll push it back. So in theory, it's a self-training system for your frontline workers to write good file notes as well. So it's connected to participant and house records. So consents, plans, risk reviews, agreements, and safety checks stay linked inside Gean. So it's all in one place. You've got billing evidence, so you can generate from the workflow and linked to rostered supports and file notes, and you've got dashboards. So missing evidence, open actions, tasks that you keep people need to do, billing status and readiness, all at a glance inside Gean. Worker control. So a worker can't be rostered without valid evidence. If they don't have the training or they don't have the identity checks or the screening stuff done, you will not be able to roster them. It's just black and white. That's one of the compliance gates we've built in. There's 2 ways that evidence enters Bily. So we assume that some people may not be ready to move their whole organisation over in one hit. So we've done 2 pathways. Pathway number 1, keep your current CRM and you upload all your stuff into Bily that you want to be sitting in that SIL compliance space. I think that some providers will do that as a transition type arrangement. I think most will just roll their whole business into Bily or Gean and be done with it. But there is a way that you keep your current CRM, export your CSV billing, file notes and incident records. We would review the evidence, flag the gaps, support the billing, and do all the stuff in the managed service that we would do normally, right? That's inside Bily. The other way is that you just go 100% Bily, and the CRM Gean is all built into that Bily operational platform. So you've got all your rostering, your file notes, your worker compliance captured in Bily, your gates, flag or block rostering where evidence is missing, billing evidence generated from the workflow and stronger audit trail than scattered files, which we all know is an issue. So both the pathways require the same worker participant billing and compliance evidence. They just are different in the way you start to use them. So we tried to make it a little more user-friendly for people who weren't ready to move their entire business over right away. You can start with keeping your own CRM and uploading the stuff that you need to billing. So you can start light and grow as it suits at your own pace. So you can keep your current CRM, upload, as I said before, your CSV, file notes, billing evidence. No need to replace your systems. Billy helps prepare and submit the billing. We chase and reconcile and report for billing for all of our providers that are operational inside our system. You can add the Billy workflows and you can use all the compliance gated pathways. So you don't have to go 100%, let's move it all across today, which could be a bit of a headache for a lot of people. You can do it in small steps and make it a little bit easier on yourself and your team. So compliance gates, no approved evidence, no operational access. Here are some of the compliance gates we've got across the operation. So Bily and Gean support your compliance. You and the registered provider remain responsible for meeting your obligations. So if you are a registered provider, you still have all those registered provider obligations, unless you are essentially doing an agreement with the registered provider at the back end of Bily to take over those registered provider obligations. The provider, entity, insurance, scope, and agreement. So this is you or it's the registered provider behind Bily. Worker screening, right to work induction, training. You know, these are all the gates across the operation. You've got to have the module certificates, refreshers built in. We've got to have participant consent, agreement, risk and plans. We've got to have house tenancy support separations and safety documents, all filed, all signed, all evidence that they're being used. We've got to have incident, complaint and risk forms inside that workflows are active and escalated so you can prove that they're actually being used and they're being closed out. You've got to have referral and consent gates. So all those things are reasonably obvious if you've been working in the NDIS. All that consent and recorded purpose stuff needs to be sitting somewhere and be able to be evidenced for audit. All of the billing gates, so we've got service, shift and funding evidence all gated, and we've got ongoing audit expiries, open risks, exceptions, etc. So compliance gates across the operation. It's a fully gated SIL system. And I shouldn't say it's just for SIL. You can use it for therapies, you can use it for COS, you can use it for community access and a lot of different stuff. But, you know, we're currently sort of pitching to the SIL market because there's a big change, but you can use this operational SaaS program, Bily Gean, for any or all of the things that you would normally be able to, you know, bill for under the NDIS. I think the two things we don't do from memory are exercise physiology, and we don't do plan management. So no approved evidence, no operational access. So again, the product is built around that rule. So if you don't have approved evidence, you can't operate. If there's approved provider, you can't activate. No approved participant, there's no onboarding. No consent, you can't do any referrals. No approved worker, you can't roster. If the house isn't approved, you can't roster people into that house. So essentially, if there's no approved evidence, there's no operational access. That's the whole pitch for Bily and Gean, and it's the main reason people are excited about using it. So see it working. Real platform, one screen at a time. So here are some screenshots. So I'll just quickly, briefly explain what these are. So this is like a SIL readiness snapshot and pathway quote. So you can answer a few questions and get a readiness score. Gaps and recommended pathway for free. So if you jump onto bily.com.au, so bily.com.au, bottom left of the screen, you can go into the free readiness check and you can start to see what you're missing, what you're not missing, what our expectations are that it would cost you to get those particular things up and running, whether it be, you know, your 0138 documents or you've got worker training or whatever it is that you might be missing, whatever that gap analysis says, you can work through that for free. No email required, and I'll spit out a report for you. And it might look something like this, right? It might say you're 47% ready. So you've got all your insurance, but you've got a big gap in service delivery and participant records, or you've got a small gap in governance and operational management. So it's pretty good. If you do nothing else and you never work with Bily or Gean, or you never work with us, this is probably a pretty useful use of your time just to roll through the readiness report on bily.com.au and see what your gaps are so that you can try and fill them. It will also give you your highest risk gaps, so the areas that need most work, ranked with action counts and missing evidence themes. So in this particular example, we've got mandatory staff training and certificates, 33%, a pretty high gap. There's 6 actions that we think you need to take. And if you look down the bottom there, you know, it gives you an idea of what you should do, could do, would do to bridge those gaps and get that missing evidence back inside Bily and Gean. We've got recommended pathways. So if we've got a pretty solid algorithm in the background of this that will take all the questions that you've got, how many workers you've got, what documents you have, what your plans are, all those types of things, and it will give you a pathway recommendation that it thinks is the most suitable for you. It's pretty accurate. Is it entirely accurate? No. Is it 95% there? It sure is. But I'd probably run through this as an example, and then I'd reach out for a free 15-minute call with one of the team and just have a bit of a chat, really. We've also got a gateway on the dsp.net.au site. So if you go to dsp.net.au/SIL-transition, there is a free SIL readiness interactive online, what should I do, what do I need to do, interactive algorithmic piece of HTML that will tell you what you're missing, what you should do as well. So you can either do it on bily.com.au or go to dsp.net.au/SIL transition and get some more information for free without talking to anyone. You could also go onto our YouTube channel, which is, if you just search up Disability Support Project on YouTube, we've got a bunch of free educational videos on YouTube that will be useful, I would suggest, if you're wondering what you should do and not quite sure. So we've got this recommended pathway, that'll pop that out. And then we've got the engine gates, so running live. We've got 51 gates that evaluate screening, training, medication claiming, and incidents. And in this particular screen, it's a workforce compliance gate. So you can see we've got some NDIS screening, we've got first aid, we've got manual handling compliance, we've got medication, and we've got plan sign off. So there's you can build this out to suit your particular business. You can have gates on there that maybe other businesses don't have on there, but this is a compliance engine for workforce compliance. So if there's red things in any of your workforce, it's super easy to see, super easy to pop that into a task, because it automatically pops it into a task on Gean for you to action and get up and running so that those particular workers can be rostered. So there's a check for every worker. You can see that's just a little bit more of a zoomed in shot of the last screen. These are all fictional workers, so there's no privacy issues here, but you can kind of see we've got some expiring ones, we've got some current ones, and we've got some lapsed ones. And this is something that will just take all that pain away. So we have a live gate check. So essentially, if you're trying to roster a worker, there's a compliance engine. So roster a cleared worker, roster an excluded worker, roster without current training, roster without planned acknowledgement, sign medication when they're not meant to. All these things are gated. You basically just can't get them done until those gates are removed, or as I said before, there would always be exceptions to the rule where management would override a gate for some safety reason or some relevant, appropriate reason. And you can do that. So it just won't block you from doing anything, but you'll have to write a pretty good contemporaneous file note as to why you made that decision, because it's not meant to happen that way. So you can see here that we blocked this worker because the NDIS worker screening has not cleared for that particular shift. So you can see your data at a glance. We've got some really good reporting functions, revenue, appointments, wait lists, and recent activity all in one view. You can see down the bottom here, practitioner status. So there's going to be a lot of our clientele therapy-based businesses, not just SIL operators or community access or direct supports. So COS, therapies, practitioners, all can be used and utilised inside Bily and Gean, but you get these reporting sort of dashboards that you can manipulate and make look how you want them to. And this one, we've got total revenue month to date, new appointments, pending invoices, waitlist volume, appointment volume by type, recent activity, and some practitioner status stuff on this particular screen. We also have a built-in telehealth system for those therapy businesses or other businesses that want to do telehealth or do screenshots and record all that sort of stuff for compliance inside Bily and Gean. It's totally up to you. And one thing I probably should say is all of our development is done in Australia. We can generally get something deployed within 72 hours because we have our developer team onshore, and all of the software and servers are all stored on AWS or Amazon servers in Sydney. So it's all privacy-based, compliant, from the Australian standpoint of NDIS requirements. Back to your data glance, this is a screenshot of what you might be looking at. So rostering is linked to compliance, as we said. So you get a weekly calendar of shifts. A worker cannot be rostered without valid evidence. So you can run all your rostering in here. When you do roster, you can choose if you are billing directly. So if you're the registered entity, as an example, you can bill directly and push that CSV, push that claim through your Xero to bill directly, or you can tick the operating through Bily, and that will be pushed through our Xero, through our registered entity, or the registered entity that's operating in the background for Bily. You can connect client records, so contacts, next appointments, last file notes, status, any clients if you got, how many are active, how many need to be spoken to this month. That can all be built into the dashboard. Claiming is compliance gated as well, so you can export NDIS bulk payment requests with the required declarations before a claim can go. So again, if you're a registered provider and you're operating just through the Gean side, so just the CRM and the gated stuff, $10 per active frontline worker, $40 per admin. You can do all your NDA bulk billing and all that sort of stuff straight out of Gean, just like you would out of most other CRMs. And you've got a provable audit trail. So every gate decision and record is hash chained in our audit log. So you can't hide, your staff can't hide. If somebody does something that they shouldn't have, there's going to be evidence that something happened in the system. And this is as compliant as we could possibly make it. So a provable audit trail. So every gate decision and record change is audited. So that's a beautiful thing for those who love compliance. When we decided we were going to build this thing, we really just wanted it to be the gold standard, top shelf product on the market, very best. No stone left unturned from a compliance point of view. We wanted, if any of our providers who were operational inside either of the pathways, Bily or Gean, had an audit, we wanted the auditors to go, wow, isn't this just an awesome piece of kit? So it's been designed like that for a reason. And some might say it's over the top, but we really did make a conscious decision to build this out as the gold shelf model. So we've also got medication gated, signed off. So EMR with a append only record, only competent authorized roles may sign. And you've got to be able to prove inside your system that the person signing off is that person that can essentially approve or sign off on that medication admin. We've got a house level command center. So again, it's just another reporting dashboard, active participants, appointments, open cases, progress notes, recent activity, all that sort of stuff. We've got the roster builders in there like any other CRM. We've got the bulk payment requests as discussed, with line items and dates and unit prices and all the batching that everyone would expect to be efficient in that bulk payment request vertical. We've got all the audit log entries, which we talked about. We've got team management, so manage workers, roles, and access. And then we've got an intake and waitlist form. So we've got intake forms to make it easy to populate straight into the system. We've got screener forms. We've got waitlist forms. You can build hosted intake form submissions, and they all land in your waitlist, which is a lovely thing. If you haven't used a waitlist, it's nice to have people sitting in your waitlist. And then we've got pricing. So if you go through the Bily side of things, it's 8 to 12% of eligible billables plus an activation tier. So because we're just kicking off for the time being, I believe we're not asking for the activation tier, but we will do at some point in time. So today being the 10th of July, my guess is maybe by the end of July, we'll be charging the activation tier, if not before. But based on your eligible billables, that determines the activation fee or the activation tier that you're on. You pay that, you get in, you get compliant, and then you start running your business. And then there's an ongoing fee of 8 to 12% of billables. If you look at the disclaimer at the bottom of the screen, that starts at 12%. It's an ongoing fee, and it will scale towards 8% as you grow, as you maintain your compliance and operate safely. So when you have a look at the operating agreement, it's really clear in there that you start at 12%. And if you jump through this compliance hoop, that compliance hoop, and that compliance hoop, it goes down to 10%. And if you then jump through these other extra compliance hoops and you stay super compliant, or whatever the actual language says in the operating agreement, you get down to 8%. So if you're a good operator, long term, you'll be paying 8% of your eligible billables. And I'm going to make this point here, and this is the collective opinion of the people involved in my group of businesses that have been involved in the NDIS for 12 or more years each in many different roles. We feel our evidence suggests that it costs somewhere between 15 to 25% of your billables to run a proper compliant business. So we're talking compliance people, we're talking compliance software, we're talking the 25 to 30 grand worth of registration and audit fees over a 3-year cycle. All of those things add up to be around a super clean, efficient operator might be at might be at 12.5 or 15%, but let's say it's 15%. And so somewhere between 15% to 25% of your eligible billables that cost you to be compliant. This is why we've priced the Bily platform at 8 to 12% of eligible billables, because it should, in theory, for most businesses, save you money. Not a guarantee that's what it's going to cost. So we're pretty comfortable with that 8 to 12%. And my understanding is there's other brokerage type offers in the market or similar type offers in the market that are 15 and 17%. So I think we're doing pretty well on the money here. That's the price of using Bily. Whether you're unregistered or registered doesn't really matter. If you're going to use our compliance, our billing, we're going to reconcile for you. If we're going to do all that sort of stuff, then we're going to charge 8 to 12%. And if you're just going to use your own registration, use Gean, it's $10 per frontline worker and $40 per admin. So this is the Gean standalone per seat software pricing. As I said, $10 per active frontline support worker, $40 per office admin user per month. Why providers choose Gean? No setup fee. The support worker app is included. You're only billed for active users, not unused accounts. There's no minimum users, no lock-in, no exit fees. I think we've got $199 a month minimum per business, but that's just, because it costs us some money to have a business inside our software and bandwidth and all that kind of stuff. And you can white label and enterprise it. There's enterprise options available. So if you've got a bigger business and you don't want any of our branding on it, we can do that for you, no problem. Just reach out and we'll put a price together. If you have 1,000 workers and you want some kind of enterprise option, or 500 workers or whatever it might be, we've got enterprise options as well. So just reach out and we'll get the team to either build it out for you as you like or get that done for you. So why Bily? Essentially, compliance first. It's one place, it's staged, there's no pressure. You can come in and try it out. Everything sits in one place instead of fragmented systems, which cost you money, and there's leakage and compliance risk in those fragmented systems. It's staged. There's no pressure. You can roll in and try it. You can use your current CRM and just upload the stuff that you need to for a while. There could be a transition period. So we've built it to make it easy and to be compliant for people. So here's what's included. When you're looking at things, you probably should include, try and compare what's included, not just the monthly price. So this is a bit of have a think about what other models and platforms charge and what you get for it. And this is just a main sort of comparison on the different providers and what they do or don't offer and headline prices, things like that. So what does Bily and Gean get you? Participant and CRM records, rostering and worker app, progress notes and shift evidence, billing and claiming workflows, all included, often included in other NDIS CRMs as well. So that's neither here nor there. They probably are. I think ours are more user-friendly and a better user functionality. They have a better user design. But often those things are included. Worker screening, expiry tracking you can also get in a lot of other CRMs. It's definitely included in Bily and Gean. Pre-roster compliance blocking. I think it's available in some platforms at some depth, but we just included up front. SIL house level operating records included. I think you can probably get that in custom forms of folders and separate systems, but it's just not off the shelf, ready to go. SIL practice standard workflows included. I've got no idea whether other CRM providers are offering that. Registration readiness assessment. I don't believe that's included in any other kind of offer in the market, but we definitely include it. Workforce training and evidence pathway. So it's available inside Bily and Gean or included by package. So depending on what size you are, what your entry level is, depends on how many worker training packages you get. Like when you're inside Bily, you mostly get them for free. When you're inside Gean, they're separate. But the new SIL worker training modules that we train on are around $100 when bought in bulk. So if you buy 25 or more, they're about $100. My understanding is, and maybe don't quote me on this because it hasn't been released yet, but my understanding is if you are a user of Bily or Gean and you need an extra worker training model, it'll be half price. So $50 for an extra worker training module, because this industry is quite transient. I would imagine there's many workers come in and out. You will constantly have to have those workers trained. So instead of paying the $100 fee, which might be the fee that you're paying sort of retail or bulk retail, you'll get it at 50% off or $50 if you're inside Bily or Gean. So connected documents and implementation, totally available or included in our packages, which are commonly provided separately for other providers. Workforce training and evidence pathway included in our package to some level, depending on what package you're on. So it's not if you've got 1,000 workers and you jump into Gean, and it just very much depends on the level you're at, how many packages or seats you get for training. But when you have a look at what other providers offer, that commonly requires a separate LMS or training provider to have those workforce training and evidence pathways. And we've got a registered provider operating pathway in the background concerned. So if you're not a registered provider, not ready to register, just want to do the supports well, you're compliant in that front end space, you can join the registered provider operating pathway. We have a registered provider behind Bily who runs all the compliance, all the core stuff that the NDIS wants that registered provider to run and be responsible for is all looked after and gated by the software platform Bily in the middle. And then we've got the pricing model of $10 per worker, $40 per admin, so Gean plus GST. So we think it's a pretty good software subscription model. Is it the lowest? I've got no idea, maybe not. When you compare it to what you get, I think you'll find it's pretty unique in the market. We've designed it to be a purple cow offer in the market. So one platform, I can replace several disconnected costs. We've got, instead of stitching together software, documents, training, compliance from separate suppliers, Bily and Gean brings them into one operating pathway. So your CRM rostering and worker app. Number 2, your compliance gates and evidence tracking. For audits, number 3, your SIL documents and operational workflows. Number 4, your workforce training and records. Number 5, your readiness, implementation and operating pathway. So Bily is great for those companies who aren't ready to be registered or who don't want to do that compliance layer themselves. Who are happy for a registered provider to do all that and for them to work under that model. And Gean is 100% just as good for registered providers who want to use their registration and do it all on their own, but want to move from whatever software or CRM that they're currently using to one that's more aligned to being compliant around the new SIL standards. So as I said before, it's Australian owned, 100% Australian owned, built and hosted in Australia. Your platform and your data stay onshore. It is owned, developed and supported in Australia. We have our operational team, our development team are onshore. We have local Sydney servers, AWS servers. So, it supports all the data stuff that you need to for privacy in Australia. And we've got local engineering and support. What that really means is local engineering and support for you. We've had an example where a provider has come to us and said, I really need this done. I need 40 extra photos per job available. And we can get that deployed in 72 hours as a bespoke piece of software inside their particular CRM, their particular platform access. So we can design things that suit just your business pretty quickly because we're onshore and we're designed to be that quick. So it's more than software. It's a full SIL operational ecosystem. Free readiness accounts, worker training modules, operating agreements and pathways. We've got a free national vacancy platform for SIL operators. What does that mean? If you've got a room in Bundaberg in Queensland, let us know. It'll go into our system. We're very active in a marketing space around SIL. So we'll try and help as best we can to fill your bedrooms, to fill your SIL vacancies. We all know that SIL vacancies are a massive drag on margins for SIL businesses. So we've built that into the Bily Gean offer as well, a free national SIL vacancy platform. You've got billing and operational controls. You've got your SIL document libraries, your compliance gates, participant referral pathways. So with consent and with all the things that you need from the NDIS around the code of conduct, we've got participant referral pathways into FCAs or BSPs or COS or whatever it might be. All the things that you might need to refer in and around participants. We're going to have a very solid provider network sitting inside the Bily and Gean ecosystem for that referral pathway. We've got clinical and assessment pathways, so functional capacity assessments, clinical assessments, RNs, complex bowel care, falls risks, and all those types of things will all be able to be triggered inside the Bily and Gean platform, or obviously with participant consent and all the things that need to be wrapped around the code of conduct and the right things being done for participants. And we'll have an audit evidence pack. So if the auditor rings up and says, or if the commission rings up and says, I want this file, and that file, it's a very simple tick the file box. We're going to send this to the commission. We're going to send this to the auditor. It will all be exported in a very compliant, efficient way and make your job very, very easy. So the National SIL Vacancy Platform, it's free for Bily users, national reach by area, so family nominees and coordinators find rooms near them. And realistically, it often costs, around 15 to 25 grand per household a year while a place sits empty. So the margin creep is significant for most providers. So we think that National SIL Vacancy Platform is going to be pretty handy for people. You can get on and do your free SIL readiness snapshot, find out your readiness score, where your gaps are, recommended pathway, get an indicative quote on what it's going to cost you to fix those things. And that's it. That's the Bily and Gean slides. I hope you enjoyed my presentation today. If you've got any questions, you can jump on to bily.com.au and do your free readiness check. You can book a call on bily.com.au. You can scan this QR code, which I'll leave on the screen for a while. You can also go to dsp.net.au and have a cruise around that website, Disability Support Project. We tend to run most of the marketing and all that kind of front end stuff for Bily and Gean. And there's some really good free tools on the dsp.net.au website, particularly in the SIL transition page, the SIL transition page. There's some good stuff there to have a read and see what you need and see what you've got and see what you don't have. That's Bily and Gean in a snapshot. It's a SIL gated software platform for registered users who might want to use their own registration. They go Gean, and for unregistered users who are happy to operate in a compliant way under a operating framework with a registered operating provider, you would go down the Bily pathway. Thank you very much. Please reach out if you have any questions.